Well, welcome back, everybody. We are so fortunate tonight to be joined by the creative team behind Two Ways Home. I am really honored to introduce to you the director, Ron Vignone, a longtime friend, first-time caller, the star and co-writer of the script, Tanna Frederick. Thank you so much for being here. And actor extraordinaire, you probably recognize him. He's a fabulous Tom Bauer. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tana, I want to start with you because I presume none of us would be here if it weren't for you. You are one of four writers credited with the script, but it feels like it must be your story at its core, right? I'm not saying autobiography, but there seem to be a lot of tie-ins. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was actually a story that a family friend had written that knew my grandfather and my mom and all of her sisters. She had 7 sisters and 2 brothers. She still has them, and he loosely based it on my grandfather and her sisters, and kind of wrote me as one of my mom's sisters to begin with, but really great script and presented it to me. And I loved the story, and I wanted for a long time to do something that was could be produced in Iowa, and grew up watching, a lot of films being produced in Iowa that had been brought in by production companies that cast actors from LA and didn't really, cast extras basically from out of state. And so I wanted it to be this in-state, keep it in Iowa love centric kind of way by casting all crew members casting all Iowa actors and crew members, using all in-state Iowa centric kind of films. And so it fit the bill. And yeah, just took it from there.
You cover a lot of ground in this movie, though. There's family, there's farming, there's mental health issues, there's PTSD, there's writing as therapy, there's raising those darn kids. Which of those elements spoke most strongly to you?
A lot of them. It was really hard. I think what's really great is through us grooming the script, the more it got more specific. And I think that's what's really fantastic about a good script is the specificity of it. And Ron's editing really came through when it came down to being like, which storyline are we focusing on? Which one is the most important? Because we had really crafted out all of these very specific, real, poignant plot points. And the PTSD was very real. My grandfather was a gunner in World War II, had a lot of PTSD, and the bipolar element kind of came through in one of the drafts. That was also a very important point because my parents grew up as being advocates of the North Iowa Alliance on Mental Illness and also the National Alliance on Mental Illness. My dad was a pharmacist and created med sets for the mentally ill in North Iowa that helped them to come into his pharmacy and be able to sort of track what meds they were on, what med changes they were going through. And my mom was a psychiatric nursing instructor and taught nursing students for the psych unit. And together they also were a part of this structure called the Transition Center, which took mentally ill off the street, put them into a housing facility in which they were able to get psychiatric assistance, psychologists, got them integrated back into society with jobs, got them apartments, got them back in touch with their families, and furniture. Just was a really beautiful program. And but, you know, growing up around that, I saw so much, of course, stigma associated with the individuals. And I think fortunately for me, I kind of grew up since I was, you know, little, not knowing why the stigma occurred, because it was just kind of everyday, you know, an everyday occurrence that I would see people going through their ups and downs. And, you know, it was really normalized for me. So all of these were factors that I really, that were really important to put into the script.
Oh, sounds like you need to get a friend to write a story about your parents next. We'll just go through the whole Frederick's clan series of films. You mentioned Ron's editing, and Ron, you are one of the editors on this film. And strangely, it would seem like that is the way you met, because Ron was an editor on a film that you were in years ago, Queen of the Lot. Is that how often does an actor like meet the editor and care?
That's a really big question.
Ron?
And actually, it seems like that, but that's not how it happened. How it did happen was that at the time I was at a festival with my first film, Say I Do, which you know. Woo! And yeah, thank you. And it was playing the same festival as Henry Jaglin was playing Hollywood Dreams. We were both filmmakers at this festival, and that's where we had met, where Henry and Tanna and I had met at that festival. Then months later, they called me up and said, hey, would you be interested on helping us out on a project? And it kind of went from there.
Well, you destroyed that whole story, but that's okay. But you did get to.
I think the thing that's kind of key in that is that working with Henry for so many years, Henry is a filmmaker who his cutting ratio is 10-1, and his love is editing, and he is a director who gets tons and tons and tons of footage and then crafts the story in the editing room. And so, I mean, I like what you said about how many actresses or how many, you know, meet an editor and really even care. I mean, I think that
they should.
It's a genius. They should care, because editing is a really a genius position that is often overlooked. And Ron is unbelievable in that craft, and he's an even better director. And so, you know, it was, yeah. So I think like that's Ron's just a genius, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, it's turned out well for you, Ron. I had the great fortune to talk to Henry Jaglin years ago, and he really was not a fix it in post, but sort of a find it in post guy in my mind.
Very much so.
And it sounds like, Ron, that maybe you did some of that on this film too, of like having more footage and helping shape story a lot in that process. Is that
yeah?
true?
I mean, I think going back to what Tanna had said about we had shot a lot of stuff, and we had shot a lot of material in a very short amount of time. We probably had enough for, you know, a 4 or 5 episodic kind of piece. And you know, it going back to the mental adversity, which Tanna touched on, it was a subject that was near and dear to my heart, definitely, and I know hers as well. And you know, the crafting of it became focused on that, but we tried so hard to make this a story that unfolded about a woman who is struggling in different ways in her life and trying to reconnect with her family. And her mental adversity was just a coefficient of her life. Instead of trying to create a film that, you know, preached to you, we were presenting a character in an honest way, and these characters and you know, their most honest expression, and the mental adversity part was just another challenge along the road. And I feel like that worked and served the story and the film in the end. I really do. So I mean, I'm tying that all back into the editing of it, because it's a very tricky weave to do that. It might not seem like it is, but it is very, very it's a delicate balance of things, when you're dealing with something that could be a cause type of narrative. But we wanted to focus on Kathy's journey and her kindred relationship with Walter, Tom. And I feel like we achieved that.
I think you did a very deft job doing all that because you follow all the stories very easily. They all feel like they have
Great.
equal weight without one overwhelming the other. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
That said, Tom, both Ron and Tanna have said it's a story about this woman dealing with him and all that stuff. You and I know it's the story of the grandfather.
Yep.
Because you are one lovable old bastard in that film. I'm curious, that character of Walter has this attachment to the land and farming. And for you as an actor, do you feel that kind of attachment to the land, or is there something else that grounds you?
It was really easy for me. My family on my mother's side are wheat farmers, or they were wheat farmers and cattle ranchers down in eastern Colorado. And so I grew up with that and lived with my grandparents for a number of years, and had uncles that came back from the war, World War II, and came back to the farm. Little town of about 101 people with maybe 200 people, farmers surrounding the little town. The population of that town today has grown to 102. So, progress. But it felt very then my dad's from Iowa. He came from a small town called Ottawa, Iowa, between Sioux City and Omaha. So everything was very familiar for me. And that's what I did think the movie was about, the land and the people.
Yeah, particularly the grandfather.
He was the elder, the family, so.
I will say for myself, a piece that really meant a lot to me in the movie is I do a lot of work teaching storytelling to veterans to cope with PTSD. And so I love that Walter is coping with shell shock potentially through writing. And Tom, I was curious because we have those scenes where we see Walter, he's got his book and you're left-handed, good for you. And you're scribbling in there. I was curious, did you think, as an actor, were you thinking about what you're writing? Did you have a sense of what you were filling those pages with other than the end voiceover?
I attempted to write the story, and of course, Tanna, the creator of the film, co-creator of the film, and the lead character in the film was the person who gave me the idea to do it. Mm-hmm. And I don't even remember if it was ever written in the script. It might have been something we just stumbled upon.
I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think so, Tom. I think that was something that you
think you brought it about as part of the treatment, and I thought it was a great idea. And I attempted to write what Walter was feeling as the takes were done. Of course, you never get to do that much during the take, but you do as much as you can realistically. But I thought it was a great idea. And in the aftermath, watching this movie with audiences, I start to be more objective about who that character is and what he's doing in that situation.
It's really compelling and convincing to me. I want to go back for a second. Tom, I'll start with you, and then Tanna, I'm curious of your take. We mentioned Henry Jaglman, and he was a director that actors just love to work with. Did you love working with Ron? He's not here. Don't say whatever you want.
Very much. This all began with Henry. I've known Henry since the 70s, starting with Tracks. And all of the movies he did after that. We were always on his list to go to his early screenings. So I've known Henry for a very long time, and in that way got to know Tanna. And then Ron. And every year at New Year's Eve party, Tanna would say, "You're going to play my grandfather in a movie in Iowa." I said,
Yeah.
great. But that went on many years before we ever got to make this movie. So I have a long history there as well.
It started at New Year's where you're just going to play her father and see how things went.
Right, then it became exactly.
Tanna, did you want to add to that in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, we're half kidding when we're saying like Tom's the lead, leading it, but I'm kind of pretty much not kidding. And I think Ron would agree with this, because it is the story is a relationship between a woman and her grandfather. And we have those people in our lives who haunt you. And as a creative storyteller, I'm sure you've seen this in your classes, that you need to tell a story about, and it's just therapeutic to get that story out. And my grandfather came home from the war. He wanted to get a scholarship and go on to get continuing education, and he was got a hernia and couldn't do that, went back to farming. He was angry, never dealt with that, had daughters instead of sons, went on to become an alcoholic, and just was a character that verbally abusive. And I'm saying all this because he went through AA, because it's vocal in our family, because it's something that we dealt with. We didn't sweep it under the rug. But you have these elements as an independent filmmaker, and I had Ron, and then I found Tom, and I don't even think I had the script yet, but I knew that the story needed to be told. And you have the pieces, and you have the passionate individuals that can do an incredible job. And I did start harassing Tom, I think, half a decade before the film got made. And I kept saying, "You're going to play my grandfather." And Tom was just like, yeah. Yeah, you have it. But it is essentially this beautiful story about Tom. But really it is a beautiful story about family and forgiveness, and how it just Ron crafted this gorgeous story about those people who, for better or for worse, we touch our lives and just keep rippling through your life. And I'm so grateful to him as a director, and to Tom for playing it. I mean, Tom even actually looks so much like, with his sharp, striking features, looks like my grandfather. So all those pieces fit into place, and you just have to tell the story,
On the authenticity note, I will say that I can proudly brag on the part of Tom that the Hollywood Reporter said Tom Bauer looks like he stepped out of a Grant Wood painting. I think that was amazing.
Yes, and he does. He really does.
Like, I remember seeing Tom the first day on set, and I thought, oh my goodness, wow, you are Walter. You are this person. And then there's not one offbeat syllable that comes out of this gentleman's mouth. He is just an amazing talent. It's like, how do you choose stuff in the editing room? That's like the hardest thing to do. It's brutal.
I remember on set too, Tom is just amazing to work with, because you just step in. He's very seamless. You just step into the scene, and he just exists as that character.
Yeah. Totally.
It's like there's no really transition into the moment. It just is. The moment is just there when you are in the scene with Tom. And specifically, it was very haunting, I remember, because my grandfather actually had that moment in the hospital bed when, as he was dying, he had a flashback of having his hands next to his side and reenacting the gunning of one of the 32 missions that he flew over Berlin. And so when Tom was in the bathtub and going through the moment of having a flashback, and then I helped him into the bed, and Tom and I had talked about it before, and then Ron had, in his very laissez-faire but very nurturing way of directing just that whole day, and that scene of us having talked about the moment, and then it was just incredibly magical, of Tom going into that flashback, and very surreal, and wow, that was a moment.
It's a great moment. And I love that we use proper terminology of shell shock because we're pre-PTSD, right? And,
Right.
Yeah.
and Ron, I was so prepared to give you a whole bunch of credit and accolades, but apparently you just cast really well.
They say directing is 50% casting. So,
but
And-
I'm curious what Tanner was saying about this laissez-faire attitude, but I mean, that's one of the things that strikes me about you just as a person, not just a professional, is that you have this really warm, soft touch about things. You feel like the human equivalent of a cardigan sweater somehow.
Oh, yeah.
And and I was wondering, is that really your approach? Is to just create a safe environment and let people go? Since I haven't
I would
nuanced that.
say, I mean, in a nutshell, I would say that's absolutely right. I mean, I had the fortune of working with an Australian director named Fred Skepsey when in my early 20s, and we became close friends, and I got very close to his creative process. And then in working with other directors as well, I saw that the best thing you could do is to facilitate that creative space for actors, and to respect that space and to be in that space as subjectively as you can with them. And it's a sacred space. And the small adjustments here and there if necessary, but you have to be organic about it. And from my point of view, I just feel like that's going to give them the most power to reach inside themselves and do something that is special and authentic in that moment. And ultimately, you come out on the other side feeling like, wow, I was witness to that. And we have these magical human moments to craft the film with. So I'm going on blabbling here, but you get the idea. In a nutshell, yes, is what you said.
No, that's really accurate though, Warren Etheredge, because
Sir Warren Etheredge, you nailed it.
Because, well, for example, too, I remember when we were shooting the last scene of Walter's death.
Oh my God!
Right. We were losing light. We had I think we just have one take, and so Ron basically, he trusts you as an actor, and that's an immense. First of all, and you feel that cardigan sweater on you, and he said, this is the last scene, and you're full of this, and you're full of this, and it's his death, and so give it everything you got. And then he steps away, and I think he expected a big, death scenes. It's like how he expected maybe a different response from me, but trusted that I would do the right thing. And then, when I saw that moment, and I saw Tom's character, it was a very quiet reaction. It was a very peaceful reaction, looking over the field, and that was the one take we had, and I think that response was correct in the moment, and that is what a great director does.
Thank you. That's really nice. I just want to add to that and say,
I'm like, I hated that choice.
No, on the contrary. No, I was actually going to credit the three of us, because that particular moment in the mechanics of filmmaking, there was so much pressure. It was literally the sun was dropping down, and the DP was in a panic. The gaffer was in a panic. Everybody was panicking, and rightfully so, because they knew that if we didn't get this, then I don't know, we'd have to come up with something else. But it was Tom, Tanna, and me, and Riley, who just remained in this Zen place and just believed it would happen. I credit these guys with it. Inside I was panicking, but but they pulled it off. And it's like you gotta just go with it. You gotta embrace the chaos of it, and it worked. And their choices were monumental. I thought they were fantastic.
It definitely works because I got misty there. I mean, like
Yeah.
I know movies well enough to know it's not, but I was pretty misty. I
The
I didn't want to
powerful
see Walter go. I want to get back to one thing you said earlier, Ron, about this organic quality, right? I have to imagine that actually filming in Iowa helps with that organic
Definitely. Yes.
nature.
Oh, absolutely. Of course. I mean, it was easy in Iowa, in great part because of Tanna and Tanna's family's, place in the community, their connections there. Plus, just on the most broad level, we were so welcomed there. We were met with open arms in the community, in the businesses, in the farmlands. There were so few conflicts and hassles of, when you film here in LA or anywhere in any major city, you're under a lot of pressure, a whole variety of things. And yes, you're right. I'd say a good 80% of those were gone in Iowa. It was a great place to film. And it goes back to the testament to what Tanna was trying to say. It was like, look, I hail from this amazing place with talented people, gorgeous, bucolic, undulating fields and land. And it's like, let's go. No, but that's what it was. It was really that good. And I think we milked it for everything we could with the size and the resources and the people we had. Absolutely.
Wow. Nicely done. That's going to the film board right there. Tom, I'm curious. I certainly don't believe everything I read on the internet, so I have to check. I did read that you were a private investigator for 15 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, probably longer.
I didn't know that.
What?
Yeah, it started with a girlfriend of mine after high school. I went to work for her father checking theaters, both regular theaters and drive-in theaters, for honesty and efficiency. And then I went to work in New York. I can't wait tables or 10 bar, as most unemployed actors do in New York or LA. And I just couldn't do it. So I went to work for this detective agency. It was like Pinkerton, but it was a retail security service checking honesty and efficiency of employees. And then later I learned how to become an interrogator and work with polygraph examiners. And I did that for that agency for a period of time, and left, went back to Denver, got married, had kids, went back to New York to try it again. And then I was employed by one of the clients of the agency up in Boston, a large corporation outside of Boston that had a chain from Maine to Florida. And I became director of security and inventory control. And so that was my career. I was on the corporate ladder going up. I was even offered the presidency at one point for this company. It's become an even larger privately owned company out of Boston. And I refused the presidency because it was owned by three brothers and they were trying to squeeze the third brother out. And I knew if I took that job at some point, blood would thicken and the brother would come back and I'd be in deep shit. But along the way, I started working just for fun of it. Again, I took my head out of the sand and did a play. And then I got cast in a play with Al Pacino. And we opened that play the same night that The Godfather opened.
Wow.
In a 350-seat house in Boston. And I was hooked by the excitement of that play and the people I was working with Pacino. and other people, and knew I had to come back into this world of acting, and was either go back to New York and be dirt poor or go to LA and be dirt poor. And LA seemed like the easier plot. And I was newly married to the woman I've been married to for 50 years coming September.
Wow.
We came out to LA with $300 and a bag of slugs. That we lived in the mafia parish of North Boston, and as a going away present, they gave us a big gunny sack full of slugs that you could use for cigarette machines and washer dryer machines. And we lived off it. And my wife went to work immediately at a law firm where she worked 40 years, every day, downtown LA, 40 years, 9 to 5, well, 10 to 7 more like, and kept me going as an actor between jobs. And, you know, I didn't have to go back to being a private eye.
Amazing. Amazing.
And
just wanna say-
God bless his wife, Ursula.
Ursula.
Yeah.
Is a force. She
Yes.
is an amazing woman. God bless Ursula.
More and more, she does carpentry, electric works, construction.
Incredible.
It was internet savvy way before anybody had a computer, and people, all of her friends call her for advice and instruction and help of how to do things. And she could be a professional shopper for the highest designers. I mean, she has an eye for that as well as plumbing and construction.
Incredible.
You know, she should have been a corporate head, but she was very important to this law firm that she worked for. She practically ran the place, you know, so.
Well, at least one of you is consistently employable.
Yes,
Acting is a tough field. But
that's this.
I'm just curious, as a follow-up on this PI thing, right? Like, you're a theater guy. You studied at American Academy of Dramatic Arts initially. You were there with Redford. You've started theater companies with Ed Harris and Amy Madigan. You've worked with some tremendous people. You're great yourself. What was more useful for you as an actor? Was it all those classes, or was it the PI work, actually looking into the lives of people?
Combination of everything. You know, I think Harry Dean Stanton said it best. He says, "I'm not an actor. I do documentaries of my life," and I feel that way. You know, I've had so many different lifetimes that wherever I go, that becomes the character. You know, and it's not about, I'm a lifetime member of the Actors Studio, so there is a method to the madness, but I'm really more of a Meisner guy, which is as if, you know, you do as if you were that person, and keeping it as simple and basic as that. So the location means everything.
Right.
You know, the people in that location. DeSica, one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, insisted that location was a character in the film always. You know, cast the person best suited for the role, regardless of fame or otherwise, and to shoot the film in the location of where the story takes place. He insisted upon that. And I see no other way of doing really good work. And having a director like Ron, who, like a lot of great directors I've worked for, doesn't impose these obligations that just stifle you and stifle the creative impulse. He's more of a kind of questioning guy for you to find your own answers. And it was very comfortable at all times on the set. Never any kind of stress or, you know, irritation or impatience, none of that ever, which means everything to the actor.
Wow.
Very nice.
I've got to say, because I didn't hear any punctuation there, which I think means that you were in the same sentence as Jessica. I'm pretty sure. So,
I was hoping for it.
and run with that.
I never
think you
got
got
to
it.
work with the Zika, but you know, Wim Wenders and Werner Herzog and Peter Greenaway and Robert M. Young. My first film was John Cassavetes' first film, so
Wow.
Ron's right in there. Yes, indeed,
Oh, Tom, that's really, really, really nice.
it's true.
Thank you.
Ron, I may wrap up on that because I don't think it's going to get better for you than that.
Get away while I can.
You're in good shape. Final notes for all of you. I thank you all. Tom, I just say the Italian mob gave you a bag of slugs. I'll just say the Jewish mob would have given you one slug with a wire on it. I'm just.
Oh, that was for our pinball machines way back when I was a kid.
That's how it works. Thank you, Tom. Ron, thank you for making a beautiful film, as you always do. If you are a cardigan sweater, we'd all be lucky to have you in our wardrobe, certainly. And you have been compared to the very best. Tanna, thank you so much for sharing your family's story. And I have to say, not just your grandfather's story, but your family's commitment to candor. I love what you were saying about your grandfather earlier. I love the idea of destigmatizing things by talking about them. That's what works for veterans coping with PTSD. That's what works for recovering addicts. And in this film, I think you do it gorgeously. You've created a tale together, the three of you, that really accomplishes that by letting us know that mental health is something that we all can confront directly, that we must forgive, and we must honor the land as well as our family. So thank you so much, Tanna and Tom and Ron. You're amazing. The film's amazing. And I feel fortunate to talk to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Warren
Etheredge.
Etheredge for that one.
Warren Etheredge.
Thank you for having us, Warren. Thank you for everybody who came to see the film.
Thank
Yes.
you. There we go.
Great.